This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and each week I'll be chatting with some amazing hikers from across the United States and abroad. Spring has finally arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and soon I'll be hitting the trails to record short-form episodes with hikers I meet along the way. Look out for those episodes to drop sometime in June for season 3. In the meantime, we'll be asking some of your favorite hikers about their experiences and adventures. We always finish the episode off with a round of this or that questions all related to hiking. I'm so stoked to share this episode with you all. The Hawaiian Islands hold a special place in my heart, and I'm excited to have our first hiker on the podcast who's living in Hawaii. Her name is Sarah, and you can follow her on Instagram @_ZERB. I had such a great time chatting with Sarah on this episode. We speak about the different hikes across the island of Oʻahu, from beautiful yet challenging ridge hikes to some stunning waterfalls, and even discuss some unsanctioned hikes. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Sarah. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I am genuinely really excited about this episode because I get my first guest from Hawaii, a place that was near and dear to my heart for the last decade. Sarah, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Really excited to speak with you. For listeners that haven't had a chance to follow you online yet, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you kind of started hiking?
Well, I am a 30-something woman who just up and moved from New England to Hawaii, kind of just to get away from the winter. So I was not really a hiker before moving here, and I set a pretty lofty goal last year of 100 hikes in my first calendar year of moving. For someone that has not hiked before, that was very daunting, but it was kind of the only way to make sure I saw everything that I wanted to on the island without missing, a certain area, the north shore, the west side, windward side, any of that. So that's kind of how I got started into hiking as much as I do.
And for listeners that haven't had a chance to visit the islands or Oʻahu, how would you describe the hiking experience on the islands or on Oʻahu itself?
You can have whatever hiking experience you want here, save for there are very few overnight hikes. You can get as many ridge hikes, flat hikes, waterfall hikes, jungle, open sun, shaded. It has literally every kind of hiking experience that you want, and almost all of them are done within 6 to 8 hours is the longest generally.
And you mentioned your recent transplant to the islands from the East Coast. How was it hiking in and around the East Coast? And do you have a memorable hike that you did over on the East Coast before you moved?
So on the East Coast, I didn't do a whole lot of hiking. I mean, Boston and its immediate area doesn't have a lot of options. For the most part, I went through the Blue Hills reservations and places kind of similar to that, where it was more so, walking the various hills in the area, but not true hiking. So the only hiking experience I had was going up to New Hampshire to the Presidential Mountain Range to hike Mount Washington with my brother when he first moved to Boston with me. And it was not what I would call a pleasant experience. I went in November with no previous hiking experience. My spikes broke. I got injured near the top of the mountain. It was incredibly cold and very windy. And probably I was what you would call someone who should not have been up there at that time, considering I don't like the cold. I'm not an experienced hiker, and I really didn't have a full understanding of what I was getting myself into. But I will say I'm very proud that I was able to complete it. So there's always that good little snippet of an otherwise not necessarily enjoyable day.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm guessing that kind of prepared you for some of the hiking that you got a chance to experience over the last year and a half.
Yeah, it definitely did. It definitely made it more able to be put into perspective when I'm about, 2 hours into a ridge hike and I think, oh my God, is this ever going to end? And then I realized, oh no, I walked uphill for 6 hours before. I can do this. So I can always go back to that and say, well, at least it's not this bad. I can finish it. I know I can.
And I think it's safe to say for most hikers visiting the islands, a waterfall hike is up there in their to-do list. Mm-hmm. For visitors visiting Oʻahu, is there an easy waterfall hike that you would recommend? And then also, what's your most favorite waterfall hike on the island?
So for there's actually two that I would say everyone should kind of do when they're here if they're okay with an easy hike. There's Manoa Falls, which I know everybody knows about, but it's kind of for good reason because it is a very tall, beautiful waterfall. There are a lot of other trails in that valley that you can take if that isn't enough adventure for you. There's so many connecting trails you can take to get a ridge view. There's literally a trail that goes straight up the mountainside beside the waterfall that you can get up to go to the flats and see everything from kind of a bird's eye view. And the other one I would say is Lakeiki Falls because it's a very short trip. I want to say it's probably not more than a half a mile each way. And the waterfall there is always flowing. It's kind of a multi-tiered little flow down. And then if you turn around and follow the water flow, there's a somewhat sketchier, but also high reward hike if you go in the rain to what's called V Falls. So that I think is a great combo hike. If you're looking for some of your group are looking for something easy and someone's looking for something a little more intense, the easy group can kind of turn around after Lakeiki before the rest continue on to V Falls. So I really enjoyed that hike. As for my favorite, that's really hard because you have to choose between the ones that look really nice and that are really tall and fun to go visit and the ones you can swim in. But I'm going to say probably my favorite waterfall hike, as probably a little contentious as the answer is, was Sacred Falls, which is an illegal hike on the island for those of you who are unaware. It is pretty heavily guarded. I likely will not be going back to it just because I don't know if it's worth the risk. But as far as legal ones that anyone can go to, Lulumahu is a wonderful hike to go to. You get a little bit into the jungle, you come out on this wonderful tall water flow that is nearly always flowing. And it is kind of easy to get lost in there if you're not following a map. So I definitely recommend everyone that goes to Lulumahu take a map because there are a lot of interconnecting trails and hunting paths and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind with that one. But that one's always a huge crowd pleaser for everyone I take there.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned it because, yeah, that was my favorite one. I know things have changed over the last couple of years because they were doing some sort of construction on the reservoir. Because previously you were able to walk on the dirt road that was next to the reservoir to meet it. But now I think they've improved it because you go through the bamboo forest before you reach the actual trail to get to the falls.
It's really a little muddy sometimes, but it's definitely worth it. If you have someone, like I said, it can be a little tricky to get through there just because there are so many paths. But I think if you have a map and you can stick to it, or if your map goes out or you lose it for whatever reason, just stick to the stream and just continue up the stream and you'll find it.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, because the stream does flow through the forest and you can just kind of follow it back up.
Yeah.
Now, on the east side of Oahu, there's 3 distinctive ridge hikes: Hawaii Loa, Wili Wili Nui, and Kuli'o. I believe you've done all 3. Which one is your favorite and why? And then which one would you say was the most challenging to reach the summit?
I'm gonna say Kuli'o is my favorite simply because there's a couple different ways to ascend. There's 2 different loops and then there's the main trail. So the main trail can go up and split to the left for the left loop, or you can go up, go to the right for the right loop, which both provide their own distinct challenges if you go clockwise, counterclockwise on them. Of course, you can take the main trail up and the main trail down, which is my preferred route, just because there's some sketchy parts on each one that I'm just like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. But I think that's my favorite. I also think it gives you the best view. Like, I think it has the best effort to payoff ratio. So for that reason, I love it. But the most difficult one for me, I think personally, was Hawaii Loa, just because I think you have less cloud or tree coverage further up. So you have a lot more time out in the sun, and you don't necessarily see a whole lot on the way up. So the views behind you on Wili Wili and on Kuli'o are, I think, both better, and they give you kind of more motivation to reach the top. Whereas Hawaii Loa, at least for me, I know a lot of people really truly love that one above all else. But for me, it just kind of felt like a long slog up, and I just did not enjoy it. And when you're telling me that I've got to go up these erosion stairs and, climb those, which I hate climbing stairs on ridge hikes. There's nothing I despise more than like going almost all the way to the summit and realizing you have like 200 stairs to climb to get to the top. And so I think for me, Hawaii Loa is probably the most challenging as a mental game.
And I think I would agree with you, Sarah, and especially if you're not a Hawaii resident, you have to park further down for Hawaii Loa, and that just adds to the mileage. But Kuli'o, I really enjoyed it because I feel like almost every mile on the switchback trail, it changes scenery. Like you start in this dry brush, and then would you consider it pine trees? It's almost like a pine tree that drop needles.
They shed their needles like crazy. It almost looks like straw or hay on the ground, considering how many there are. But the flora change on your way up is incredible, and it's a great marker for on your way down. You're like, I'm almost out. We're back in like the dry, scratchy brush. It's a great marker too for how far up you've gone for like elevation and things like that. So I really enjoy that one. Whereas Hawaii Loa, you kind of start a little bit higher, so you don't get as many like plant changes in scenery.
And you're right. It's not demoralizing, but you spend all that time hiking on the trail, and then to reach the summit, you have to hit those stairs, and it's a workout. It's something else. Now, outside of waterfalls and ridge hikes, I think another popular hike on the islands are the pillboxes, especially on Oʻahu. I feel like they're probably a little bit more prevalent there than some of the other islands. But for listeners who might not know, can you share what pillbox hikes are, and then which one has been your favorite that you visited so far?
So pillbox hikes are just basically hikes that go to what are called these pillboxes. I have no idea why they're called a pillbox. Maybe you have some insight on that. But they're basically just these bunker structures that were built during World War II that were left there. So they're just these kind of small, about the size of a shed, concrete dwellings that are built into the mountains. And I want to say the two most popular are going to be the pink pillbox on the west side, which is great for sunset. And then on the flip side, the one that's great for sunrise that a lot of people love is the Lani Kai pillbox. And I know a couple people that are what I call pillbox hunters, because there's hundreds on the island. It's just most of them aren't very well known, or they're in difficult to access places, and they're not as, beautifully graffitied. The popular ones all have their own very distinct artwork, which I think is really cool that they've managed to take this kind of dull, bland canvas, and over the years, artists have gone up and created these really beautiful graffiti paintings on almost all of the pillboxes that I know. And each one is different. So, for example, like the pink pillbox hike on the west side has obviously a pink pillbox, but they also have a puzzle pillbox and things like that. So I think they're a sight to see in and of themselves, in addition to the views that they give you when you're on them. So I think those are kind of bucket list hikes for everyone as well. I myself have been in probably about 30 to 40 different structures. That doesn't necessarily mean 30 to 40 different hikes, because like I said, some of them have, up to 3, 4, 5 structures per hike. Like Lani Kai has 2. If you continue going down a little bit further, you run into a 3rd and 4th one, but kind of have to go through a cactus field to get to them. So I don't necessarily recommend going to find those ones. That was an unexpected, prickly experience. But everyone loves the pillboxes, and for good reason. People say that they don't want to do a touristy hike or something, and it's like the hikes that are here that are touristy, I really have to say they aren't lame. They're not famous for no good reason. They're all really good for what they offer. And I mean, even Diamond Head people, I think here year make fun of Diamond Head as being this tourist trap of a hike. And, I've been up there for sunrise. And if you can get like an early ticket, because now there's a ticketing system for it if you don't live here, if you can get one of the earlier passes in the morning and kind of get up there really quickly, particularly in the winter when the sun rises a little bit later, you can be up for sunrise. And it is beautiful to see the sunrise from the pillbox at the top. There's a couple different structures up there. Of course, they took one down, but it's beautiful up there for sunrise. So, I think anyone that's thinking about visiting or using this episode as kind of, there's form of research about what hikes to do, don't discount the popular ones or the touristy ones, because I think they do have a good payoff for a little bit of work. You may have people around you, but they're famous for good reason.
Exactly. And some of those are a little bit easier to access when it comes to the pillboxes. Because, what's funny, Sarah? The first 4 or 5 times I did Diamond Head, that still to this day is the one hike. And, some people will consider a hike, some people won't. It had the most rescues, helicopter rescues, out of all the hikes I've done.
People want to close down hikes that have far fewer rescues. And I'm like, but Diamond Head. And I think it's more so, it's not necessarily that Diamond Head is dangerous. I think it's just more so people become unprepared, or they don't realize that there's stairs there and they have knee issues or ankle issues, or, they slip because it can be a little steep, even though it's, paved, or it was paved really well at one point. Now it's basically one giant pothole. I think people just don't necessarily understand how hot it can get up there is another one. People get a lot of heat exhaustion up there. So
no, definitely. And I saw people going up in wedding dresses, high heels, or boat shoes, and it is an easy hike, but at the same time, it has its challenges if you're not well equipped.
Everyone's easy is different. That's why when people say, oh, what's a good easy hike for me? And I'm like, how easy are we talking? Because easy for me would be like the pink pillbox on the west side. Whereas for someone that may be hard, for someone who, has joint issues or has not done any cardiovascular work or anything like that. So I think easy is a very relative term. And I think people get a little overconfident when they see that, every tourist can do this, so I have to be able to do this. So, and I think that's something to keep in mind here, is that the land is not necessarily all that forgiving. If you know what your abilities are, you can do almost any hike and turn around when you need to. But if you haven't necessarily done any walking or hiking that isn't on a perfectly paved path, I think you'll run into some challenges here, particularly if you have joint issues or, stability issues of any kind.
And, talking about hikes in a volcanic crater, the one that I had a love-hate relationship with on the island is Cocoa Head. I think everybody either loves it or they hate it, but it's an old tramway that climbs over 1,000 feet if you count the parking lot, where, on a busy day, you're probably adding another 100, 200 feet of climb just to get to the bottom of the tram. It's less than a mile. It's 1,048 steps to reach the top. What's your relationship with Cocoa Head, and what's your favorite part of the hike and your least favorite part of the hike?
Yeah, I definitely feel you on the love-hate, because I will get done with that hike and say, oh, that wasn't that bad. I'll do that again sometime. And then I'm probably 500 feet up the next time and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do this to myself again? And then, of course, I don't think you can talk about Cocoa Head without talking about just how out of shape and horrible you feel when you're doing it. And then you have two groups of people passing you. You have the people that do this up and down 3 times a day that are 20 years old, and you're just like, look at you. You're going to regret, your knees are going to regret that. I have a friend whose record, so I honestly hate going down more than up, because they're so far and it's so jarring to go down. And I'm not someone with the balance or the trust in my clumsiness to not fall the entire way down, so I have to walk down. But I have a friend who gets up it in 17 and down in 7. And I'm just like, wow, ow, everything hurts. I'm like, my lungs hurt hearing about that. My knees hurt hearing about that. You're on a whole different level. But then, when you're up there in the morning, you also have these elderly women that are just passing you right by, going up and down 3 times a day. And you're just like, I'm supposed to be in shape and I'm really struggling. It's a very humbling I think if you want to go there and you really want to test your cardiovascular fitness, I think it's a great hike for you. And I end up taking everyone that comes to town to visit me, I end up taking them up there just because it is a beautiful spot for sunset or sunrise. So because you have a very unique vantage point of being able to see the ocean on the east side, but you also have kind of unique view of the rest of the island on the west side. So it's crowded almost all the time. I do not recommend doing it midday at all. It is a long slog. The last friend I took up, we got started a little bit later than I wanted to. And I think I told her probably at around 700 and 800 feet, just go on without me. You'll enjoy the sunset. I'll wait here. And she's like, oh, don't be so melodramatic. And I'm like, no, just go. Leave me here. It's fine. I'm not being dramatic. I literally mean I want to sit here and not move anymore. So I totally get the love-hate with Coco Crater. What I actually love about that crater is that there's more than one way to get up. You don't have to go up the tramway. Obviously, the tramway is probably the easiest and safest way to go, but there's also the rim around because the crater's collapsed on one side. So it's kind of a slanted way up on both sides. So you get the opportunity to do the rim, which is probably the sketchiest, but you also have the opportunity to go up to the Coco Crater Arch on the other side, which is a great sunrise spot. Very low effort for a huge payoff. And you can actually continue up to the rim from the archway. But if you're a new hiker, you're not quite sure of your footing, or you don't have the right footwear for that hike, because a lot of it is just very slick, smooth rock on a steep incline on the archway. And then once you get to the rim, it's very crumbly. A unique feature, I think, of Hawaii is that people think that, oh, I've hiked in the Rockies or I've hiked in Sedona. I know how to hike on like rock and stuff. And then you get here and like it's all this very crumbly volcanic rock, which is a little jarring the first time you take a step, and that what you stepped on just disintegrates under your feet. So I think having knowledge of that can make you more prepared to do those types of hikes. But I mean, I do love and hate Coco Head. It's worth it, but some days it's not.
Yeah, same here. Like when I would tell people and they'd be like, this is the hardest hike I've been on, I'd be like, trust me, the view from the top is worth it.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times, if the weather's good, it's definitely worth it. But, one question I always like to ask people that do Coco Head is, do you take the bridge or do you not take the bridge?
So I took the bridge once. I already mentioned that I am a huge klutz and I don't like heights. Heights and I have a very hate relationship. So the first time I went up, I was just shaking the whole time. And I was like, I'm going to slip right through these railroad ties and I'm going to break my ankle. And then I took Murphy's bypass every other time. But I told myself I had to do the bridge at least once. And then I was like, okay, I did it. I have nothing else to prove. I've done it. It's over. I can go the easy way now.
And for listeners that don't know, so what would you say, Sarah? Like maybe almost halfway, maybe a quarter, a third of the way up?
Yeah, probably between a third and a half.
There's a little section. It's not too long, but it's elevated above a ravine. I forget how tall it is. It might be like 20, 30 feet to the bottom.
Yeah, it's not super high, but...
So you can either choose to go on the bridge or you can go around and there's a bypass on the side. And
the bridge, for people who are picturing like plank wood bridge, it is not that. It is literally just railroad ties as a bridge. And they are just as far apart as the rest of the tramway. And so you've got probably, what is it, between each one, like 2 feet between each step.
Yeah.
So there's definitely enough space for a whole grown full human to fall down between them. So I'm Team Murphy's bypass on that one.
One of the other popular hike there on the island, especially on the windward side, is Olomana. And that one has its increased risk the further you go. Some people call it Three Peaks. How was your hiking experience on Olomana, and did you make it to the third peak?
So I've done it twice, and like I said, I have a very real, very aggressive fear with heights, and I think there was like an Instagram reel a while ago that was just like, how do you do it? And you're just like, you do it scared. I just do it scared. Getting up to the first one and second one aren't too bad. It's a kind of a long hike to get to the first peak. At least in my opinion, I was expecting it to be shorter, but when you're going up the first one and then you have to kind of climb down and then up the second one. I made it to the second. The first time I went, I only made it to the second one. My second attempt at it, I got down from the second, went like halfway to the third one. There's an obstruction is what's called the keyhole. And I got there. And so that's where a lot of people that have fallen and gotten injured or unfortunately died there, that's where they've run into that problem. It's basically the small jet out of a rock. I guess not small, it's rather large. And you either have to like hug your way around the rock. And when I say hug your way around, you're already on a path that's only about 1.5 feet wide. You literally have to hug your way around. And if you lose your grip, you're falling like 2,000 feet. So you either have to hug your way around until you can get back to the path, or you can climb up and over the keyhole. So the hole in the middle. And I got there and I was like, maybe I can do it. And then I looked at it and I was like, nope, this is not for me. There are some people, one girl in particular I know, she does it. She's got to do it like 4 times a week or something like that. Like she goes all the way to the end and she knows that mountain like the back of her hand. And even she says that like it can happen to anyone, because a lot of times the people that have fallen haven't necessarily been first timers. They've been people who have done it, half a dozen times before. And so I think just having a healthy respect of like what can go wrong and assessing the risk benefit of having, say, you've completed it versus being able to walk away from second peak. I mean, for me, it was a really easy choice. I don't like heights. When I start getting scared, I don't need anyone to talk to me, but my anxiety just leaves through my mouth and I will just start saying whatever comes to mind. I'll be like, oh, that tree is green. I really like that color green. In fact, that color green reminds me of my car, which is also green. But I only got a car because my last, and it just keeps going. And it just keeps going. And I can't stop talking when I get scared. So once I realize that I go on those stream of consciousness, that's kind of my own personal warning to, turn around. This probably isn't right. But I haven't made it. Have you made it all the way to the third peak?
Yeah, but it sounds like it's eroded way more than when I did it, because it was a little sketchy, but we did it on a pretty dry day, so there wasn't too much worry of slippage. But it sounds like it's gotten worse, because for me, the drop down from 2 to the keyhole was the sketchiest part, because it was that, like, not a sheer cliff, but you have to
it felt
scale
like it.
down on those. Yeah,
definitely. The ropes are still there. Definitely. I mean, that part is definitely sketchy, but I mean, you have the support of the ropes, whereas going around the keyhole is just, you've got to be pretty steely. It's pretty similar, I think, to getting to the chimney at the notches. So but I mean, everyone has their own, risk tolerance, confidence level. Some people are just not afraid of heights and can do it, but my fear of heights makes me very shaky and unsure of myself. So that's where the danger in it lies for me, is that I'm not sure of myself in those situations.
And at least for me personally, the first peak has the best view out of all 3 of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's worth going. I mean, I think almost anyone that's done any sort of climbing at all or bouldering can make it to the first peak. And then I think the majority of these people can make it to the second peak. If you got a bear crawl, you got a bear crawl, but I don't think there's necessarily a whole lot of risk, at least more risk than going to the first peak than going to the second peak. It's the third peak where you start getting into those more sketchy territories.
Yeah. You mentioned illegal hikes, and unfortunately there on Oʻahu, a lot of popular hikes that aren't maintained have been shutting down over the last decade. So this next one, before we kind of jump into it, I do want to kind of do like a PSA to our listeners and say that this hike is illegal. There is no legal way. Even if you hear that the backside is legal, it is not. And if you have to use spikes to make it on the backside, you're only eroding the mountainside, and it's just making it worse and making it more dangerous than the actual stairs. But it is $1,000 fine if you get caught and ticketed. I think now, Sarah, they're making you have a court appearance. So if you do get ticketed, you have to go to court. So if you're visiting and you get that ticket, you're going to have to fly back for that court date. So if you're thinking about doing this hike, really think about it and make sure that it's something that's worth the risk. The hike that we're going to talk about is Haiku Stairs, otherwise known as Stairway to Heaven. Sarah, can you kind of describe a little bit about the hike on the stair side?
Yeah, so I've actually done it both ways. So the first time I attempted it, I actually attempted it when I was a visitor, and I got caught, but I got away. That first time it kind of scared me from not wanting to do it again because I was so close to getting caught. And they've actually recently increased the fine to $2,000. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, but in the back of my mind, I was like, gotta do it. Can't not, gotta do it. Made a fool of myself the first time. I gotta get redemption. And for me, it was worth it. I was like, whatever, if it's $2,000, it's $2,000. I will figure it out. And I ended up going, my first time actually completing the stairs was with someone who had already done it before. And so when he took me up, I had read as much as I could about the stairs. But what I didn't notice anyone had ever actually said was just how awful the first half is. So once you're on the stairs, there are platforms and clearings and things like that, but those don't start appearing until you're about halfway up. And so you have 2,000 steps you got to climb until you can take a legitimate break. And so if you want to take off your bag, if you want to stop and sit down and eat a sandwich, you're not going to be able to comfortably do that until you're about halfway up. And then after that point, you start getting platforms every so often. They start getting really close together. So you can start stopping, taking pictures, things like that. So that's something that I didn't necessarily know. So I was about a third of the way up and I literally was like, I can't do this. If it's like this the entire way up, I'm done. I can't. I got to turn around. I got to go home. Like I when I said I know my limits, I knew my limits and I knew I could not keep going at that pace, at that incline without a significant break. And so he turned around and looked at me and he said, oh no, don't worry. The halfway point's coming up. You're going to be able to like take your backpack off, sit down, take a break. There's a whole clearing. And I was like, thank God. So that I think is important for people to know, that you're not going to be able to stop and take a break at any point really for the first half. If you want to be as safe as possible, you're not going to want to, dismantle your pack and like root through it, because a lot of the stairs in some places are either very slick. The stairs are very narrow. They're like, I don't think I'm a large human. And when I'm walking through, I only have about 3 inches on either side of my hips. So it's not a huge space to go through. And so going up, I think, is really a mental test of will more so than the way down. So the way up freaks me out more than the way down. Everyone, when I take them up, I've probably been up a dozen times now, but whenever I take someone up, they're always like, oh, I'm really nervous for the way down, because some of the spots, there are just a straight ladder. Like they're stairs, but they're just legitimately on top of each other. And for me, being able to see what's in front of me on the way down really helps, as opposed to just thinking I'm going to fall backwards into the abyss. So for me, that's much sketchier going up than it is down, but I know other people feel the exact opposite way. But going up, it is such a beautiful trek up. You don't even have to reach the summit to really start getting amazing views very quickly, because there's a highway at the bottom of it. And that highway is probably a good 100, 200 feet off the ground. And I want to say you pass that highway within 10 minutes of starting the trail. So you gain a lot of elevation very quickly. I would recommend anybody thinking about it to look up the stairs on Google Earth and actually just take a look at what kind of steepness you're looking at, because you're going to start running into problems if you get scared on the stairs. If you have an intense fear of heights, I almost freaked out my first time. But if you are someone that railings do not solve that fear, I would not recommend attempting it, because there's a lot of spots where it's just you're climbing 20, 30 feet straight up, and then on either side of you is the sheer drop off. So I think being well prepared for that, and not just seeing the pictures where, oh, it's actually a really pretty staircase and la da da. Like it is, there's definitely those spots and it is gorgeous, but being naive to the fact that not the entire trail looks like that. Part of the stairs are completely broken from a storm, so you have to climb over them. Part of the handrails are rusted out in places. I think being aware and familiar with the danger, it's not a risk-free hike, but in my opinion, it's much safer than going the back way on the ridge. The back ridge it's beautiful. It's a beautiful hike, but you can do another ridge. You don't have to do the Mauna Loa Valley Ridge, because like you said, it's illegal regardless. You pass on to state, federal, and the Board of Water Supply land going the back way, and stepping foot on the stairs from the top is just as illegal from the bottom. And while I don't know the validity of these claims, I've heard people say that there have been occasionally officers at the top handing out tickets. And so going up there, and they'll pose as hikers, whether they're at the bottom of the stairs or the top, they'll pose as hikers. They're not going to be there in official gear. So, I think if you're going to make the 8-hour trek that is going up and down the quote unquote back way, or the Ridge Valley hike, you should also be aware that your dreams might be squandered at the top too. Also, a lot of times it can be super cloudy. I went up there just this past week and we got a complete whiteout. It was cold. It was rainy. I could see absolutely nothing. So, planning out that hike, I think, is incredibly important. And then also there's the issue on the stairs of if there's a bunch of people going up and down, like I said, they're not wide. So it's incredibly hard to pass people. You have to be kind of cognizant of who is ahead of you on the trail and who is behind you on the trail. And so if you're on that bottom platform, you're at the halfway point, you see people coming up, you might want to wait there for 10 to 15 minutes before you continue down. Because some people, like, I'm very comfortable stepping off of that trail, like off of the stairs in certain points and just holding onto the railing until I can get back in. But not everyone is comfortable with it, and banking on the fact that if you're not comfortable with it, that someone else is going to be, I think is a pretty big gamble. Because if you're not comfortable stepping off the stairs, I don't think it's right that you ask someone else to either, because passing on the stairs can be really, really difficult in certain spots and actually impossible in others. Keeping that in mind. But I mean, if there was a way that we could get conservation efforts on the back way to the stairs, I say with finger quotations, I think it would be a better option for most people. But right now, that trail there are native trees that have been absolutely ruined and gutted by people pulling on the roots, stepping on them, trying to get up over the trail. That trail, and then there's another one, Mount Olympus, when you go up, both of them, there's parts of the trail that are so eroded that your path is literally 3 feet below the rest of the mountain. Yeah. And I think at that point, if you're a true hiker and you're a true steward of the land, as I think most hikers are, there has to be a moment where you say, is this worth it? Am I doing more damage to the earth than what benefit the earth is giving to me? Mm-hmm. And I think when you see that and see how bad it is, it's really disheartening, because you don't get that point until you're at the top and it's like, okay, am I going to continue walking along this and causing more damage, or am I going to turn around after all this work? And so unfortunately, I think the human response is just to go through and say, oh, I'm just one person. But the number of people that wear spikes and bring trekking poles and things like that aren't really necessary on the trail, because the type of soil or earth in Hawaii is not the same as most other places. It's either volcanic rock or clay. Occasionally you'll have some other weird rock. You either have this crumbly volcanic rock, or you have this clay that is either incredibly dry or incredibly rain soaked. And when it's rain soaked, your spikes aren't going to help. You're just going to get completely mucked up, and you're not doing anything for yourself other than, adding to the erosion. So, I mean, my personal advice, like when I recommend it to people, because I think it's worth it to do the stairs, is to do the stairs and to really evaluate if going up the back way, most people go up the back way just so they can have a picture on the top of the stairs. And my kind of gripe with that is, like, you wanted the picture on the stairs. You didn't necessarily take the stairs. So you're advocating for the opening of these stairs without actually having done them. And instead you're going the back way, harming the trail that is there. And I kind of have a conflict of whether or not I think that trail in the back should be closed, at least for a few years, while the valley recovers a bit. Yeah. So that's my personal take on it. I know everyone has their own opinions and feelings on that, but that's my personal view. And I think the view of a lot of the people that hike here with any sort of regularity feel.
And I think, Sarah, if people really want to support the stairs and its availability to the general public, please follow the Friends of the Haiku Stairs. Mm-hmm. They do have a plan to make it accessible to the general public. The last thing I saw, Sarah, maybe you can update me on this, but the city or the county voted to dismantle instead of repair and open it up. Is that still the case?
So it is. We do have a slight shimmering light, because I do follow Friends of Haiku and that whole thing pretty closely. There has been one of our federal Congress people have brought up the possibility of the federal government stepping in, buying the land that the stairs are on and opening it up to the federal public as part of like a mini national park type deal. And there's some hemming and hawing on both sides about whether or not that's actually a good thing. So, I mean, obviously the good would be that we can open it up, because prior to the federal government stepping in and saying, hey, maybe we can help out, is that there was a plan to open the stairs, but there's just too many people with, I think, too much power and too much NIMBYism that don't want the hike reopened, that kind of just say, nope, we don't want it. And they fund specific, initiatives and things like that. So I don't think it's going to happen from a state level or a local level to be opened up. But the problem a lot of people are afraid of with the federal government stepping in is that it would become no longer accessible to the people that live here and do a lot of the work on maintaining it. I mean, what Friends of Haiku really wants to do is Friends of Haiku wants it to be like guided tours up where you get, education on the significance of that specific mountain, native plants, native animals that live in the area and things like that. So it's truly a holistic experience of you're hiking here, know what you're hiking through and respect the land and all of that. So they wanted to have local native intelligent guides to do that. And so the fear is with the federal government stepping in is that that part of it will be nixed. And then also if it goes on a ticketed reservation system, that means that the people who live in the neighborhood or live in the area are also going to be competing for the ability to access these stairs, which can feel quite contentious. I mean, I'm sure you saw it when you lived here that not everyone in Hawaii feels that Hawaii is actually part of the US. And so having the federal government come in and say, you can't access this unless you sign up to access this within a specific period of time doesn't necessarily go over really well here. So, I mean, I think it's a delicate situation. And I mean, I certainly don't have the answers for that. But I mean, my hope is that it remains open with some sort of compromise to allow those who live here and have lived here to have more of a say on it than, people who don't.
No, I agree with that, Sarah. I know one of the original plans early on was to have a higher ticketed item for visitors and a really budget-friendly ticket for locals and natives. It's a contentious thing, and, I really hope that they do come to a compromise and it stays open because it is a beautiful hike. The view on a clear day is amazing, but, there are some issues on the backside and on the front side that they have to meet and compromise with. So I'm really hopeful that, they don't dismantle it. One thing you were talking about, and I was always interested because for me, like you said, there's certain sections where I do feel comfortable enough to be able to hop off the stairs, but there's some sections where like I'm not hopping off. And like you said, it's narrow. Have you noticed from your times doing it what the etiquette is on those sections? Like who gets the right of way? Because when I did it, there was a section where I was like, I'll stick one leg out and you stick out another, and then we shimmy to compromise. But like I wasn't going to do fully off because there wasn't anything to step off of. And I didn't want to make that person have to climb down and then climb back up.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally on a trail, I can sometimes be ruthless in my enforcement of trail etiquette. Like if I see someone leave something behind, I'll be like, hey, you left this. And if they're like, oh, it's fine, whatever, I'll be like, no, you left this, take this with you. For example, the one time I did the back way up, I only did up, I didn't go down. I was like, I'm never going back down that valley. I just went down the stairs. But when I went up the valley, there's a point near the stairs where you have to have a rope to get up, and there's no way you can get up without the rope. I was probably 3/4 of the way up when this other girl coming down starts on the same rope I'm on. And I was like, excuse me, I'm already on the rope. And she's like, well, trail etiquette says the person coming down has the way up. And I'm like, the person already on the rope has the right of the rope. And so she tried like making me climb all the way down. And I was like, I am 5 feet from the top. Just no. And so I think that on the stairs, the same kind of thing applies, that even if you have to go back down a little bit to go back up, I think whoever is going to be in a better state to hop off first hops off first. So if you've been climbing up 5 minutes and you're now in a place where you can't hop off the trail and you need to climb back down 5 minutes as opposed to making the other person climb back up 15, I think that's where it goes. And I think for the most part, a lot of people that actually are able to successfully get to the haiku stairs are understanding of that. Like I haven't run into anybody on the stairs that isn't willing to like compromise and like move around. Sometimes I've seen like two very smaller people like just turn sideways, and I've done this before, like lift your backpack up on the railing and like you're just very closely, you're just like, hi, I'm not going to kiss you, but like we're now face to face on the trail. So I think that's the way most of it goes. But when you get two people that can't do that, I think it's just more so a shimmying one way or the other until someone can hop off. But I mean, at one point, like I've just been like, I knew I was going to be the person that had to reclimb stairs. And so instead I just kind of like got under the railing and held onto it with like my ankles and my hands. And I was just like, please pass quickly. Please pass quickly. I don't want to climb back up. I mean, I think it's kind of up to whoever's on the trail to make that decision. I don't think typical trail etiquette of, the person coming down has the right of way necessarily applies in trails like this. But like I said, I mean, for the most part, everyone that hikes here is pretty friendly. So very rarely have I ever run into an incidence of like someone not willing to work with, what you're given in front of you.
Yeah.
I think there's only ever been like one or two people that I've met on the trails, and I've just been like, oh my God, I hope I never see you again. But I think for the most part, everyone is super friendly. It's how I've met most of my friends since moving here. And so I don't think that necessarily worrying about that is going to be your biggest fear on the stairs.
Yeah, so true, Sarah. We did a deep dive into your Instagram, and not too many people know about this. I think it's gotten more recognized over the last couple of years, but you also went across the valley and did the Stairway to Hell hike. How was that experience, and what was the sketchiest part of that hike?
So there's a couple different routes to get there. I took the Aiea Ridge approach. You can also go through the Mauna Loa Valley, which is similar in location to the trail that goes up the Haiku Stairs, or the Stairway to Heaven. But we opted to do Aiea Ridge approach, and that is one of my, again, love-hate relationship. Aiea Ridge in and of itself is a very, very, very long hike. It is probably one of the longest hikes on Oahu, if not one of the top 10 longest on all of the Hawaiian Islands. And you definitely have to have some mental preparedness, but you do have these beautiful grassy flat sections at the top of each fall summit, which are just incredible. It literally looks like someone mows it. It is so lovely. And so you get to these points where you can actually sit down, take a break, take a rest. And I think we started off with 7 or 8 people. And we left. One person decided she was done at like the second or third grassy platform. So probably 3/4 of the way. So she was like, I'll hang out here until you guys come back. And we're like, okay, cool. We have our phones. Call if you need us or if something sketchy happens, And then we continued on and we reached the summit, the very last grassy plain on Aiea Ridge, and 3 others that were with us decided, nope, I'm done. I can't do anymore. It's been like 7.5 hours of hiking. I'm good. And then the remaining 3 of us were like, we're gonna make it to the stairs. And after the summit, you have to go along the KST, which for those of you that don't know, there are 2 mountain ranges on Oahu. There's the Waianae Mountain Range, and then there's the Ku'ulau Mountain Range, which were both part of 2 separate volcanoes before they collapsed onto their respective sides into the ocean. And so what's left is that edge of the volcano, what's known as the Ku'ulau Summit Trail, or the KST, and it is the sketchiest and just most mentally challenging and physically challenging hiking you can do on the island. I was not prepared for this. This seems to be a theme for me, that every time I do a really hard hike, I think I know what I'm getting into, and then I don't. And so I'm like, I can do it. I'm just going to do it scared. I'm just going to talk the whole time. It'll be great. This will be fine. I'm going to make it all the way to the stairs. So we're hiking along. I have a couple steps that I've taken that it looked like there was ground there and there wasn't ground there. So that was a little sketchy. But you look to your left and it is just a sheer drop down, like completely nothing there for like 3,000 feet. And if that's not humbling enough, you're like, oh, well, I'll just stick to the right since there's a mountain beside me. There's no mountain beside you. That is also a sheer drop, slightly less sheer and a few more plants to grab onto, but you're still tumbling all the way down. Like there's no stopping. So you definitely have to be mentally prepared for that. And on top of the fact that the trail is only about 1 foot wide. And so from the edge of Aiea Summit to the Stairway to Hell, which were intended to be a mirror copy of the Stairway to Heaven, they were supposed to have another major bunker at the top of there because the top of Stairway to Heaven is a massive radio tower that the Navy put there. That's why the stairs exist. During World War II, the Navy I feel so bad for anyone that was told they have to walk up and down those stairs every day, but that's why that was put there. And they intended to put one on the opposite side as well. So they started constructing the stairs. And what are interesting about those stairs is they aren't finished and they only go from the top down. They only go down the mountainside for about a couple hundred feet. So you can only access them from the top of the mountain. And getting there requires going along some of the sketchiest hiking that you can possibly do. So in Hawaii, we have some intense winds. It's not always just calm and breezy. You can get these really intense winds at the top of the mountains. And I was probably about halfway along and I got hit by this huge gust of wind that very nearly took me and the 2 remaining hiking companions I was with down the side of the sheer drop off. And so at that point, I could see the stairs. I could see the fencing. I could see the stairs. I could see all of it. I was so so close. Mind you, there were also like these 19-year-olds that were just like running the KST. I don't know why, I don't know how, but they were. And I was like, yep, it's another instance where I feel very, very old. But they were just, they were going along with no problem, but I'm there with my 2 hiking companions, one of which has done this before. And I find a rare tree up there and I just hold it. And because of that very near, very real brush with death, I just started bawling my eyes out. I was like, I want to go home. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. So I do have plans to go back because I've never actually stepped foot on the stairs and I so desperately want to. So I really want to do that. The alternative route is to go up the Mauna Loa Saddle, and that comes with its own set of issues and risks. You're not on the KST for nearly as long. Mm-hmm. However, you do have to climb up the one side of the saddle, which is basically free climbing, rock climbing on volcanic rock. So some people are comfortable with that. I know some people that have done the sketchier saddles other than that. But I mean, the Mauna Loa Saddle is a beast in and of itself. So I think I'll probably end up back on Aiea Ridge, but Stairway to Hell is entirely different. There are people that go from heaven to hell and back, which I think would be I think that would be a super cool story to tell, to be able to go to heaven to hell, but that would require both going down and up both sides of the saddle. So that's not in the cards for me, but I think the people that can do that are just so cool. I also recently, I had never heard about this, but apparently there's also a stairway to purgatory mixed somewhere between heaven and hell. So I was talking to someone that I just recently did the stairs with, and I was like, wait, you mean hell, right? You're talking about the stairways to hell. And they're like, no, the stairway to purgatory, which is like between the two. And I was like, I didn't even know that existed. So I think it's one of those like more or less known type of hikes. And I don't think there's any risk in telling people about it because I don't think anybody knows how to get there or where it's at. Because even going online, I only saw mentions of it. I didn't see any like maps or anything like that. So that's the other thing I love about here. There's so much that you don't know, and there's always more hikes to find out about. When I initially moved here, I had the naive goal of hiking the entire KST from North Shore down to Makapu. But I think it's safe to say that won't be happening for me anytime soon now that I know better. But I mean, I think only like 20 people have ever attempted and completed that. So that's not for me.
Yeah, I think she still might have the record, Sarah, but I had a friend and coworker that has the record for fastest KST from end to end. I forgot how many days she did it, but like she's an ultra marathon runner, so she was like up for it, but I was just like, I have no idea how you did that.
Yeah, it's like 2.5 or 3 days or something like that. And I'm just like, I mean, I have friends. So, I mean, the hiking community here is really strong. So I actually have friends that, again, I've only met online. Haven't actually got to meet a lot of these people in person yet. But I have a couple people that had invited me to go on this like really long hike. I think it was like Aiea over to the stairs and then down Tripler or something insane like that. And I was like, I really appreciate that you guys think I'm up for that, but no. It was like, that's a really intense hike. I love that you guys think I could handle something that impressive, but no. And they did it ridiculously fast. I think they were done in like 6.5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was like, no, it took me 6 hours just to get to the top of Aiea, let alone along the KST and down another ridge. No, it was like, that's not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Props to them.
Yeah, there's some really wild people here. They can just do these incredible hikes. And I'm just like, sometimes I do one and I'm like, look at what I did. And then they're like, oh yeah, like I also did this really incredible thing this weekend. And then they tell me what they did and I'm just like, oh, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's great. The people here are just lovely.
I think I shared this maybe on a previous episode, Sarah, but there was a year that I was focused on doing Cocoa Head and getting under 20 minutes. That was my goal, to get up to the top under 20. And it took me about 3 months of doing it consistently on the weekends. And I did it. I did it like I think on my birthday weekend. And then that same afternoon, I'm watching the local news and this 13 or 14-year-old boy is on the news because he just broke the record for like his age group of climbing up in like, I want to say it was like 13 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm happy with 20.
Yeah.
Under 20, there's no more.
Yeah, it's like being really excited that you ran your first like 10K and someone's like, yeah, I just ran an ultra marathon. Like, you go. And you're just like, yeah, you do go, don't you? But yeah, people are always doing stuff like that, and I'm just like, I don't know how, because like I sometimes just want to roll myself off the mountain when I'm going up Coco. It's
Yeah, I
a
wish the
feat,
tram was still there.
right?
This way you could just ride it down.
Yeah, honestly, I think going down is harsher than going up, because you're like, oh, I could run down this, and then you start like jarring yourself on every step when you run down. I don't know how people run down it. It really boggles my mind. But
And talking about summits, I feel like throughout the world, people have some sort of, not necessarily a ritual, but like they do something when they reach their summit or when they reach the end of the hike. Maybe it's a favorite snack or meal, maybe it's a drink, or even just a moment of zen. Is there a custom that you routinely do when you reach a summit, or maybe when you make it back out?
no, and I think there's I've met people who do this, and I think there's two groups of hikers I've realized since I moved here. There's the people that do the rituals are the ones that actually enjoy hiking. And then there's people like me who absolutely loathe hiking, but just love the feeling after. So I get to the top and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I did it. I get to go home and I get to eat now. And that's exactly how I feel. I thought I was very strange in that, but I think there's a lot more of the me type out there than I thought there were, because I talked to other people and they're like, yeah, I don't like hiking either. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm not just like, I don't need help. I don't need to go see someone because I'm masochistic or something. Like I'm on the uphill hike and I'm like, why did I make this my goal? Why did I choose to do this every day? Yeah. And then I get done and I was like, that was great. I love that. I'll do that again. It's like the after feeling of when you're finally in your car and you're like, yeah, that wasn't that bad. I.e. how I feel every time I get off the stairs or I get done with Cocoa Head. I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then I start and I'm just like, this is awful. Why am I here? So yeah, no rituals for me other than being really stoked to be done. So yeah.
Now, when it comes to your pack list, is there a piece of gear that you consider your MVP, like your most valuable piece of gear that you carry up?
Honestly, it's really lame, but I could not hike without my phone. I live and die by the apps that provide all the maps and things. So I live and die by that. I would not feel nearly as comfortable without my phone, just in case, like, thankfully I haven't had to need a rescue or anything like that. But like on the off chance that I did, or, I got lost, I'd be able to, find my way back because I download the maps and things like that. But ever since that first trip up Mount Washington, I pack the least absolutely possible. I bring even if I'm going on a 6-hour hike, like I will probably pack, like I don't drink nearly enough water. So I'll bring like 2 liters of water and a couple granola bars and call it a day. I'm not a huge overpacker. And I think it would be different if I hiked anywhere that you could actually do overnight hiking, because I'm a habitual overpacker when it comes to those types of things. In my head, and I know this is probably a little silly, is that I'm like, I'm going to be back at my car in a few hours. Like it is what it is. I don't need to bring 5,000 different things. I think the most excessive thing I've ever brought is like a hammock to hang up at the end of one of the hikes. And so I really try to make it as light of a pack as possible. So, I mean, sometimes I'll bring my drone with me if I know that it's not going to be too windy at the top, or I'm going to be able to use it and get a nice shot. But that's probably the most excessive thing I've brought. But I don't really, like I said, I don't wear spikes. I wear pretty much the same outfit of like biking shorts, a tank top, and a hat to every hike. I wear every hike is almost prepared for in the same way, and like a battery pack for my phone. That's about it. Okay. So I'm not a heavy packer. I don't have any holy grail items or this is going to change your life kind of hiking things. But I mean, that's just me. And I feel like that's a lot of the people here, actually. Some people have like the satellite phones, like the Garmin things. But I think if there's enough people on a hike, and I rarely, if ever, hike alone. So I think if there's enough people on a hike, you're probably pretty safe.
Yeah. And I feel like most hikes, you have somewhat of cell phone coverage on the hike.
Yeah, at least on Oʻahu, yeah.
For folks that are interested in hiking on Oʻahu or just in Hawaii in general, what tips or advice would you have for visiting hikers in order to have a safe and rewarding experience?
Definitely research your hikes ahead of time. Know that the weather on Oʻahu is unpredictable in the sense that no matter what the meteorologist says, it's got a 50-50 shot of being right or wrong. You could toss a coin every day and say it's going to be rainy at the top, windy at the top, sunny at the top, whatever. And you'd be right just about as much as the weatherman, because we have so many microclimates. Oʻahu, I believe, has 9 of the microclimates, and and Big Island has 11 or 12 of them. So it really depends on what elevation you're going to, because we have everything from incredibly hot, dry to lush, cooler, rainy rainforest. So I think really understanding that aspect and being prepared for it is going to make it A, safer, and B, a lot more enjoyable, because if you're planning on being out in the sun and being really hot and you are going on a jungle hike to a waterfall, which is almost all of our waterfalls here are jungle hikes, you're going to be in for a very rude awakening, because you're going to bring a lot more water than you need to bring, and you're likely going to have worn like waterproof something. That is my biggest tip, because I mean, I talked about how Lulumahu was one of my favorite hikes. The last time I went in, there was this, I think it was probably two families, and they were tourists coming in together, and we were like probably halfway through the bamboo forest, and they stopped us and they're like, "Are we almost to the falls yet?" And I was like, "Oh, do you not have a map?" And they're like, "No, we are just going to follow the signs." And I was like, there are no signs here. It's pretty easy to get turned around even with the map, because I predominantly use AllTrails, and where you cross the stream is sometimes not always so clear in AllTrails, because it looks like you're over on the left side, but you're actually on the right side and stuff like that. So bringing a map and understanding certain things, like if you're going to a waterfall, follow the stream to the waterfall if all else fails. Making sure that if you are going on a ridge hike, even if you start in town and lower in the shade, you're going to be out there in full sun, probably for the last third of the hike at least. So I think understanding those intricacies, where I think a lot of other places, the weather and the hiking conditions stay stagnant from the start to the end. It might get a little breezier, it might get a little cooler, but I think for the most part, in a lot of other places, the conditions stay the same, whereas here the conditions can change very rapidly, especially when you're entering from one climate zone to the next. And because we're an island, typically at the top it could be extremely sunny, or it could be completely clouded in and you're in a whiteout. So I think understanding those possibilities can make for a much more enjoyable hiking experience, because that's not something I understood at first. And I got really lucky that this past week when I was on the stairs, that was my first whiteout that I've ever had. And it was supposed to be clear, but I think you have to be able to be willing to take what you can get if you only have a certain day that you can do a certain hike, accepting the fact that you are at the mercy of the weather and just being prepared for that. The girls I went with, one brought a blanket to the top of the stairs. Like, she made sure she had room in her pack for a blanket, because she's like, it might be cold. And lo and behold, we're all up there in our jackets, just like shaking and shivering. And I mean, we got some really cool pictures just because it was like we were in front of a white backdrop the entire time. I mean, if you lean into the experience of the weather, it can be really good, but the weather's the biggest thing you can't plan for. And so therefore you have to plan for in how you approach the hike. But that's probably my biggest thing, along with researching what the hike entails and having a map.
So true. Really good tips right there, Sarah. You talked about it, but when you first moved there, you set a personal goal to hike 100 hikes in a year, and you were able to accomplish that. How was that experience? And then for this year, for 2023, do you have any upcoming hiking goals, or maybe some goals beyond 2023?
That hike goal it really was a proxy goal. It was the only way I could ensure that I saw the entire island and that I would meet people and things like that I really wanted to do. So doing that was a really positive experience. I definitely got lackadaisical in the beginning and middle of the year. There was at one point in like September where I was about, 18, 19 hikes behind schedule. And I was like, this is going to be miserable. There were some days following that where I had to go on 2 hikes a day. And I was like, I hate this. This is so dumb. Why did I do this? But I had announced it to like certain hiking groups and things like that. And I'm someone that if I have told them I'm going to do something and I really start sticking to it, that I'm going to have to do it, or else I will forever feel shame. Shame was a really big driver in having to complete that. But I really enjoyed it because I went on a lot of hikes that I don't think I would have otherwise and ended up really loving them. So one, being able to say I did 100 hikes is a great feeling in and of itself, but also being able to see all of the things that I've seen and meet the people that I've met have been a gift in and of itself. But as far as what are my kind of goals going forward, I was going to do 100 days of surfing this year. I've never surfed a day in my life. I figured, why not go along with the trend of, just doing things I've never done before and saying I'm going to do it all the time. I don't know if that's really going to pan out for me this year. I have zero upper body strength and paddling out is just about the most miserable thing I've ever experienced in the water. We'll see. I've gone a handful of times, but I don't know if that's something I will stick 100 to. I do know that while I have no immediate plans to move away, that I do want to try and knock off every hiking trail in AllTrails before I leave. So that's a pretty lofty goal. I mean, my original goal was to do 100 separate trails in Oʻahu, and I quickly kind of realized that that was not going to be a very fun goal to do, but I wanted to keep to the heart of that as much as possible. I ended up doing 93 different hikes, and I want to say probably 88 of those were on Oʻahu, because I did a couple in Maui and I did a couple on Big Island. But I want to say for the and I repeated a couple, like I did the Pink Pillbox, I think twice, I did Coco twice. So I think I did a couple of them were repeats. The stairs obviously was twice counted. There were some hikes that I did more than twice, and I was like, well, I can't keep counting this. That just defeats the purpose. But yeah, I think I did probably somewhere around 80 to 88 different hikes on Oʻahu. And looking back, it sounds like a lot when you say it, but I essentially use my Instagram as a catalog for myself to be like, oh, what was that hike? I don't remember. So when it comes to tagging, I have a rule that if it is a state functioning hike, so say it's like a state park or it's meant to be a trail that people take, I have no problem posting those, because those hikes have the resources and the availability, and they're intended for people to be on them. So there are things out there to help hikers, right? And they're not meant to be a secret. They were created for people to hike on. And so I don't think it's right from my perspective necessarily to gatekeep those, or whatever your view is on that. But when it comes to hikes that aren't, city, state, or federally okayed, those I'm a little more, well, it's hike at your own risk. And they don't have the infrastructure or the resources to appropriately maintain them and fix them as erosion occurs, as what happened with Mauna Loa Valley Trail. There's no one doing maintenance on it because it's not an official trail. And so those are the ones that I won't necessarily tell people where they are or what they are unless I know them personally. And so I have the pictures on Instagram, but I have a calendar. My Google Calendar, I put all the hikes in on what days I did them, so I can just match them up to that. So I can be like, oh, what hike was that? And I can go because sometimes I'm much better at remembering the visual rather than the name of it. So I'll go through my Instagram and I'll find it. And this is especially helpful when I have people visiting and I'm like, oh, like what hikes do you want to do? Because sometimes they won't do any research on their own. They're just like, oh, I want to do this or that. So sometimes they pick the really touristy ones. Sometimes they don't. And I'm like, oh, okay. So this hike was this hike. Okay, we can do that one. We can certainly do that one. That's kind of how I approach it. But looking back at my Instagram, I'm like, if you were to show me it, I'd be like, oh, she probably did like 50 hikes. And then I actually realized that I did so many more. It just doesn't feel like I've done that many. So I definitely think that I can eventually close out all of AllTrails, which will be really exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. Props to you, Sarah, because I'm doing the 52 hike challenge, and that averages out to one a week. So the fact that you knocked out 100 in a year is awesome. And what better way to experience the island and see the island, but by doing some of these hikes all over the place. So that was it for the regular questions, Sarah. This next section is the this or that questions, where I'm going to give you 2 hiking related topics, and you kind of just choose the one that you gravitate towards the most. All set?
All right, let's go.
Ascending or descending?
My lungs say descending, but my knees say ascending. I'm probably going to go with ascending as a little bit easier.
Waterfalls or summits?
There are some hikes you can get both, so I'm going to say both.
Switchbacks or straight up?
Straight up, every time.
And trek poles or freehand?
Freehand, definitely.
Do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
After.
And do you bushwhack or go around?
I bushwhack, I think, more than go around.
And I think this is going to be an easy one, but do you jump in or do you stay dry?
Always jump in. You got to. You can't put all that effort in and then just turn around. You've got to do it.
Yeah. And this one's a hard one because you get to experience both, but sunsets or sunrises?
Sunsets. I hate mornings. I don't like waking up. I work night shifts, so I really don't do mornings.
Gotcha. And this one's a little tough. So I have a follow-up one that's a Hawaiian edition, but spring flowers or fall colors?
Ooh, probably flowers.
And then my Hawaii edition, these were my 2 favorite flowers on the trails, but ginger flowers or guava flowers?
flowers. Red ginger flowers. Red ginger. 100%. They're so cool.
Yeah.
They're so cool. Have you ever seen, and I've only ever seen it once, have you ever seen the yellow rattlesnake flowers?
No.
They literally look like ears of corn from about 10 feet away.
Really?
Yeah. I've only ever seen it on one trail, and I was like, what is that? Is that corn? And then I got closer because it literally looks like husk corn growing up out of a stalk, and I was like, is that it? Yeah, no, it's just a rattlesnake plant. I was like, that's really cool.
I'm gonna have to look that up, and I'll post it on the show notes because I don't think I saw those. And you kind of answered this one already, but do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Tag on the ones that are supposed to be accessible. Don't tag on the ones that don't have resources.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me on the podcast today. If listeners are interested in following your adventures for 2023, what's the best place they can follow you?
The best and only place to follow me is on Instagram at _Zerb, Z-E-R-B.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link that as well.
All right. Cool.
And mahalo nui loa, Sarah, for joining me on this podcast. Really fun talking story with you about the islands. It's still something that's deep in my heart, and I'm hoping to make it back there in the next couple of years. But really appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. If I'm still here, hit me up. We can go hiking together.
Oh, for sure. Believe it. Mahalo once again to Sarah for joining us on this episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. Be sure to follow her on Instagram to keep up with her latest hiking adventures on island at _ZERB. We'll be putting out new episodes every week throughout the spring. Please be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsocks.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.